Control rarely looks like control when it first appears. It doesn't arrive as domination or force. It arrives quietly, wrapped in urgency, expectation, emotion, and timing. Most people don't realize they are being controlled in the moment it happens. They only realize it later when they feel regret, exhaustion, or a sense that they acted against their own interests. This is why calm people are so difficult to control. Not because they resist everything, not because they argue or confront, but because they interrupt the process before control can take hold. Control depends on speed. It depends on emotional movement. It depends on pushing you to act before you have fully settled inside yourself. Calm people slow that down. They don't eliminate pressure. They don't deny emotion. They simply refuse to let emotion decide timing. And timing is where control either succeeds or fails. Most control mechanisms work by narrowing your focus. They compress your attention into a single moment and say, act now, decide now, respond now, agree now. Calm people expand the moment instead of collapsing into it. They create space where others feel only urgency. This space restores choice. That is the first reason calm people are so hard to control. Most people react because reaction feels relieving. When tension rises, the nervous system wants resolution. Speaking, agreeing, explaining, or complying becomes a way to reduce discomfort. The action is not chosen for its wisdom. It is chosen because it ends the feeling. Calm people relate to discomfort differently. They allow it to exist without immediately trying to remove it. They feel the tension, the uncertainty, the pressure, but they don't convert it into impulsive action. This tolerance changes everything. Control relies on discomfort being unbearable. When discomfort loses its urgency, control loses leverage. Calm people do not confuse intensity with importance. A raised voice does not automatically mean something matters. Urgency does not automatically mean something is true. They wait. That waiting is not weakness. It is regulation, and regulation blocks manipulation at its root. Another reason calm people are difficult to control is silence. Most people rush to fill silence. They explain. They justify. They defend. Silence makes them uncomfortable because silence removes feedback. Without feedback, they don't know how they are being perceived. Calm people are comfortable with silence. They don't rush to manage perception. They don't rush to be understood immediately. They don't feel threatened by brief misunderstanding. This creates imbalance. People who seek control rely on response. They need confirmation that their pressure is working. When calm people remain quiet, pressure loses direction. The other person often begins to speak more. They repeat themselves. They escalate. They reveal intent. Calmness turns pressure outward, not through confrontation, but through patience. Control also depends on emotional predictability. If someone knows what makes you anxious, guilty, eager, or defensive, they know where to push. Calm people are emotionally consistent. Their behavior does not dramatically shift under stress. They don't become impulsive when pressure rises. They don't seek reassurance when uncertainty appears. This stability removes access points. Control thrives on emotional fluctuation. Calmness smooths those fluctuations. It makes behavior harder to steer. Calm people respond from principle rather than mood. From alignment rather than impulse. That makes control inefficient. Another overlooked factor is validation. Many people are controlled because they are seeking approval. They want to be liked. They want to be seen as competent. They want to avoid conflict. Control often disguises itself as concern for these needs. Calm people do not outsource their sense of worth to the moment. They are not negotiating their identity during interaction. They don't rush to prove themselves. They don't rush to correct every assumption. They don't rush to defend every label. This independence removes leverage. Control requires need. When need weakens, influence weakens. Calm people also separate tone from content. They don't mistake emotional delivery for factual importance. They don't assume intensity equals truth. They listen for substance. This discernment protects them from emotional framing. Many people are controlled not because of what is said, but because of how it is said. Calm people reverse this dynamic. They slow the interaction down and evaluate meaning rather than energy. This takes time. And time is something control cannot afford. Attention is another critical factor. Control requires access to attention. If someone can dominate where your attention goes, they can influence what you prioritize. Calm people guard attention carefully. They do not respond to everything. They do not engage with every stimulus. They do not treat every request as equally important. They choose deliberately. This selectivity limits vulnerability. Control loses power when attention is not freely available. Calm people are also comfortable delaying decisions. They trust that clarity improves with time. They do not fear missing the perfect moment. This confidence removes panic. Panic is the primary doorway control enters through. Fear of loss, fear of rejection, fear of delay. Calm people acknowledge fear without obeying it. This internal authority is difficult to override. Control also works by redefining identity in the moment. Labels are applied, roles are suggested, expectations are imposed. Calm people do not rush to accept imposed identities. They don't fight labels. They don't defend against them. They let them pass. This refusal to engage prevents identity hijacking. Control fails when identity remains self-defined. Calm people maintain clear emotional boundaries. They know where their responsibility ends. They do not take ownership of other people's emotions. They do not rush to fix discomfort that does not belong to them. Control thrives on emotional entanglement. Calmness disentangles. Over time, calm people develop a reputation, not as aggressive, not as dominant, but as grounded. People learn that pressure does not move them easily. Urgency does not rush them. Emotional tactics do not work. This reputation becomes protective, not because calm people threaten consequences, but because effort stops being rewarded. Control follows the path of least resistance. Calmness increases resistance without hostility. This makes control inefficient. Calm people are not immune to influence. They listen. They consider perspectives. They remain open, but they decide independently. Independence is what control cannot penetrate, because control depends on dependence. When someone does not need immediate reassurance, approval, or relief from tension, control loses its grip. Calmness also changes how conflict unfolds. Calm people do not escalate. They do not mirror aggression. They remain steady. This steadiness removes fuel. Without fuel, conflict burns out. Control weakens. Calmness is not detachment. It is presence without urgency. It allows engagement without surrender. It protects clarity, timing, and attention. This is why calm people are impossible to control, not because they dominate others, but because they govern themselves. If this perspective resonates, notice where urgency usually pulls you. Notice where silence feels uncomfortable. Notice where pressure speeds you up. Those moments are not flaws. They are signals. Signals pointing to where calmness needs to be practiced. Calmness is not something you display. It is something you cultivate. And cultivated consistently, it becomes one of the strongest forms of self-protection available. Not loud. Not forceful, but steady. And steadiness, sustained over time, is extremely difficult to control. Most people believe control happens through force, through pressure, through words that are loud, sharp, and persistent. But real control doesn't look like that. Real control hides. It hides in reactions, in timing, in emotional leaks most people don't even realize they have. When someone raises their voice at you, they are not strong. They are exposed. When someone rushes you for an answer, they are not confident. They are afraid of silence. And when someone needs you to react immediately, what they are really saying is, I need access to your nervous system. Calm people deny that access. They don't argue faster. They don't explain harder. They don't rush to correct misunderstandings. They pause, and that pause does something unsettling. It forces the other person to sit with themselves, with their own urgency, their own emotion, their own lack of control. This is why calm feels threatening, not because it dominates, but because it refuses to participate. Think about it. You can only manipulate someone who is emotionally reachable, someone who needs approval, someone who needs to be understood, someone who needs the interaction to resolve quickly so they can feel safe again. Calm people don't need that. They let conversations remain unfinished. They let tension exist without rushing to dissolve it. They allow others to feel uncomfortable without trying to rescue them from it. That alone shifts the balance, because control is not about winning the moment. It's about who remains stable when the moment stretches. Most people collapse under emotional duration. They can handle intensity, but not uncertainty. Calm people thrive there. They don't feed chaos. They don't mirror agitation. They don't escalate to match energy. They lower it. And energy always follows the lowest stable point. This is why attempts to provoke calm people often backfire. The louder one side becomes, the more irrational it looks next to silence. The more frantic one side acts, the more composed the other appears. Eventually, the narrative flips. The calm person doesn't need to defend themselves. The contrast does it for them. This is also why calm people are difficult to pressure into decisions. Pressure relies on emotional compression, fear of missing out, fear of disappointing, fear of conflict. But calm people don't rush to escape discomfort. They sit inside it. They observe it. They wait until it loses its power. and when the pressure dissolves, what's left is clarity. That clarity is dangerous because it means decisions are made slowly, deliberately, and without emotional debt. You cannot corner someone like that. You cannot rush them. You cannot guilt them. You cannot frighten them into compliance. Not because they are stubborn, but because they are present. And presence is the one thing manipulation cannot override.